Hello, everybody. So happy to have you with us today. This is a marvelous day. We're celebrating 15 years of our financial freedom movement, and thank you for joining us. This is going to be a great day. It really harkens back to 2005 when, in July of that year, we started a little Bible study in the basement of our church, and we called it dfree. But what I want to say is that this celebration, although it's the 15th anniversary of dfree, it really goes back to 1968. For me, that's when it all began. In 1968, Martin Luther King was killed. And on the day of his death, my grandmother sat at her dining room table with tears in her eyes. And when I realized how impactful Dr. King's life was on my grandmother, I decided that day that I wanted to make a difference in somebody's life the way Dr. King made a difference in my grandmother's life. And I've spent every day of my life from then until now doing something to contribute to the welfare of others, particularly the Black community. And in 1968, as a high school student, I was with another group of students, and we started one of the first high school Black student unions in the country. And to get started, we decided to invite Malcolm X's widow, Betty Shabazz, to come to our school as a speaker. Well, you have to know that in a town that's predominantly Caucasian and in a high school that's predominantly white, it created quite a stir to have the wife, the widow of Malcolm X, come to a predominantly white town. And there was great resistance to what we were doing. In fact, the school tried to stop us from having a Black student organization. It was in that moment that I became an activist. We boycotted school. We had press conferences. We had rallies. And thus, you can imagine how exciting it is for me now to see the young activists around the country, 2,000 protests in America in response to police brutality, because it just brought back so many memories. But starting with my high school organizing on into college, when I went to college the year after, I recognized, along with some friends of mine, that drugs were the greatest threat to Black success at our college. And we started a very effective anti-drug campaign that resulted in me almost losing my life. I went from there to work for the Urban League, where I was organizing people that had been the victims of predatory lending and unscrupulous landlords. We had one landlord that literally took all of the furnaces out of his building in the dead of winter, and Black people were living without heat, and we organized a rent strike. I went from the Urban League to Operation Push, running that organization, being trained by Jesse Jackson for 3 years. I left Operation Push and started a leadership institute for young people, then pastored a church. And in all of those roles, I considered myself a community activist. However, during most of those years, I was an activist without any capacity. I always had to borrow money. I always had to raise money from other people. In fact, when my dad died at 47, he left my 44-year-old mother a widow. And if my dad had not had life insurance, my mother could not have depended on me because I was absolutely broke. I was becoming famous. I was an activist. I was in the media. I was speaking truth to power, but I had no savings. I had no insurance. I had no financial capacity at all. And so I was trained as a young man to see problems, to see police brutality, to see institutional racism, to see and understand inequities in education and housing. As I grew, I decided that I didn't want to spend my whole life just seeing problems, but I wanted to become a person who could solve problems. And so today we celebrate 15 years of my work in the space of financial freedom, not only with seeing the disparities, and there are plenty of disparities to see, the high cost check cashing facilities that many of our people use are saturated in our community. The high interest payday loan stores are in our communities. And so we see this wealth gap that exists between Black families and white families, where the average white family has more assets than the average black family, to the tune of 20 times. And so the bottom line for me became that with all of our activism and all of our social consciousness, it did not make sense to allow a whole generation to be woke and broke. And that's what I was. We didn't call it woke back in those days. We called it being conscious. But I was conscious, but I was absolutely broke. I couldn't donate money, not only to the United Negro College Fund, the NAACP, to an HBCU. I couldn't even tithe to my own church. When I started ministry, I was so busy trying to look like a preacher and live like a preacher that I didn't have enough money left to do what I was teaching my members to do, and that is to tithe and give God the first 10% of our income. And so we started in 2005 addressing this issue of financial freedom from the perspective of needing three things. We needed a brand. You know, we live in a brand society, and without a brand, it almost doesn't matter what you're doing because no one would ever know about it. And so dfree, in the first instance, is a brand. We discovered through our research that people who were drowning in debt or people who were being chased by bill collectors, they had trouble admitting that. You know, we're proud people, especially church people, but they did not have trouble saying, I'm trying to be D-free. Understanding that the D stands for debt, delinquencies, and deficits, that a person who would not say, I'm trying to get out of debt, would say, I'm trying to be D-free. And so D-free facilitated our need to have a positive emphasis. The emphasis is on freedom. And as a people, you know, we've focused on freedom since 1619, political freedom, social freedom, educational freedom, and now financial freedom. The second aspect of D-free is content. We needed more than a brand. We needed content. And as I looked around, I found that there was no content that I could use starting in my own church that was biblically sound, culturally relevant, and financially affordable. We tried using other materials and found that it was either so secular that we couldn't use it in church, or it was so European that we couldn't use it in an African-American setting, or it was so expensive nobody could afford it. And so we created this brand and content to be relevant for African-Americans with the specific goal of helping organizations use the tool while remaining who they are. I'm a firm believer that we really don't need more organizations. We've got organizations on a local, county, state, national level. We've got the National Association of this and that. And so what I did not want to do was to try to start, quote unquote, a new organization. What I believe God led me to do was to create tools that our existing organizations, our existing churches could use to build up our members, to empower our families, and to create sustainable models for the organizations themselves. And so when we started D-Free in 2005 at First Baptist, what happened to the church, while focusing on the financial capacity of the members without raising any money, without doing any gimmicks, without having any special prayer lines or anointed water to sell and sanctified handkerchiefs, the income of the church went up by $1 million because D-Free teaches people to take control of our finances instead of having our spending take control of us. So now we had a brand and we had content, but consistent with our tradition, consistent with our history, we needed something that would be a movement. And I'm not talking necessarily about going viral, but every city in America and every organization that we have is concerned about the economic disparities that exist between blacks and whites. All of us are concerned about the fact that we disproportionately represent the lower income categories in the country. And as African Americans, we know how we got here. Anybody who works for 246 years without a paycheck, any group that went 100 extra years being denied access to the rights that other people have, any group that was designated as being less than human and less than equal to their peers, any group that was denied access to federal programs. There were federal programs that gave away land to others that was denied to us, gave away low interest loans to others that were denied to us. There is no group of people in this country that has been treated the way the descendants of African slaves have been treated, and we bear the brunt of that legacy. And so we needed to have a movement to address our financial ills, a movement that was both reactive and proactive. We do have to react when the federal government makes it legal to charge 400 to 500 to 600% interest to our people. We have to respond when we see our neighborhoods being disinvested in policies that make it harder for us to access capital. But we also have to be proactive. And what dfree decided was that we needed tools to facilitate a movement. That's what our $1 billion challenge represents. I challenge Black America to pay down $1 billion in consumer debt. That's 100,000 Black people paying off $10,000 in debt, which comes to $1 billion. And what our research indicates is that for every dollar of debt that's paid off, if it's shifted to an investment in insurance or in real estate or other kinds of financial growth strategies, you can turn a dollar of debt payments into $5 to $6 of wealth. And so we decided that the $1 billion goal would be the first step. And I'm happy to report today that we're about $25 million in to the $1 billion pay down. And that's a part of what we're going to celebrate today. And so the brand, the content, and the movement is now 15 years old. And this conference is designed to celebrate the successes, to introduce you to some of the leaders, to hear from some of the influencers that have helped us along the way. Angela Lee Yee from the Breakfast Club, my homegirl from Brooklyn. She's a part of today's program. Tarek Brooks, who has worked for 2 Black billionaires. He works for Sean Diddy Combs today and oversees his entire enterprise. He's on our program today. We have a young woman who is the leading African-American in the largest healthcare system in New Jersey, 33,000 employees, and our platinum sponsor, RWJ Barnabas, and Mitchell A. Davis will be with us today. Also, we have speakers from Prudential, Shanae Harris, a young Black woman who is in charge of Prudential Foundation and is responsible for the distribution of millions of dollars of grant money throughout this country. And the reason these people are important, along with the panel from the Greek community, the Divine Nine, and other individuals that have been so impactful, the reason is this. When we talk about financial freedom, so many people give thumbs down. So many people say, oh, they're just talking. So many people believe it's not possible. What I have learned in my own life is that my own possibilities become more real when I see other people do what they're doing. And so today, as you listen to the presentations, as you hear the speakers, what I'd really like you to do is to start making a list of the things that you know you can do because of the things they have done. Not only achievements for yourself, not only accomplishments in your own life, but accomplishments in your family, in your organization, in your relationships. I am where I am because I began studying people at an early age. And when I saw African Americans on boards of directors of corporations, and I heard their testimonies, and frankly, I saw their income, I said to myself, I can do that. When I read a book written by a friend of mine called Perfect Credit, and the strategy for achieving an 850 credit score, I said, I can do that. And I've done that. When I saw young men and women who were building great churches that made an impact in their communities, I studied them and I said, I can do that. And what I'd like you to do is to really think in terms of the things you would like to do and understand that if anyone can do it, you can do it also. Not only can you be the beneficiary on a personal level, but you can be a leader on a family level, on a community level, or perhaps even a national level. We are today really looking at organizations like the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, the Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, the AKAs. We're connected with the National Baptist Convention of America. And these organizations have one thing in common, and that is we believe that less debt is more healthy for Black America than more debt. And the more we reduce our debt, the more we can shift those dollars into investments, to own our own businesses, to buy businesses, to pool our resources, and to do for ourselves what history has proven no one else will do for us. And so you can do it. You can start a group on the $1 Billion Challenge. You can teach a course and facilitate the dfree curriculum. You can motivate people in your space. You can influence people through social media. And that's what this celebration is about. We're celebrating the fact that a 24-year-old who is out of college for 3 years paid off all of her student loans. We're celebrating the fact that a 75-year-old for the first time became a first-time home buyer. We're celebrating the fact that young people in their 20s are becoming franchise owners and they're hiring other people. And yes, we're celebrating the fact that there are people who had given up on their financial lives who have now resurrected their dreams because of this dfree movement. I'm grateful to my staff. We've got a hardworking young staff. They're underpaid and overworked. And today is the outcome of many, many hours of work by young people who are as dedicated to this movement as I was in my early years to the civil rights movement. I'm grateful to all of the organizations and particularly to our sponsors for giving us the capacity that we have such that we don't have to charge churches, we don't have to charge individuals, that we make our services and our resources available for free. I'd like to thank Stand Together Foundation for its support for our foundation and Prudential for their ongoing support for our brand. The RWJ Barnabas Health System is one of our newer partners, and they've exposed their employees to the dfree content. And I'm certainly grateful to God for the strength that God has given me after all of these years to still be in the struggle, on the field, in the fight, as we celebrate today 15 years of this great brand and this great movement. One of our challenges is to get the word out, without having been arrested for anything, without having cursed anybody out. You know, sometimes ratchet sells faster than truth. But I believe Black America is ready. I believe that the recent uprising of social protest is relevant for what we're doing. And that's why our theme for this celebration is from crisis to clarity. We do have options, despite the fact that we have barriers, despite the fact that we have haters, despite the fact that many are trying to pull us back into the days when Blacks were subordinate to everybody. We still have opportunities. And the dfree movement, this celebration today, is about exposing, promoting, and celebrating those opportunities. So sit back, take out a pen, click on social media, spread the word that you are at the dfree 15th anniversary Crisis to Clarity celebration. I'm honored that you chose to be with us. I pray that God will bless you as a result of what you hear and what you see. And I'm sure you'll be inspired by the various presentations and these dynamic personalities that are with us.